today I'm here with Rufi Thorpe, who wrote The Knockout Queen, which is my favorite book of the year so far. And I'm so excited to talk to her. We've been kind of Instagramming back and forth, so I was just saying I feel like I already know her. But, hi, Rufi.
Hi. I'm so happy that I get to commune with you.
Exactly. So your book came out this week. What is it like publishing a book during all of this?
Well, I have been experiencing it as very fun because I find I find talking to people really interesting, and I've gotten to collaborate with writers I wouldn't have gotten to make fun videos. And the moment I understood that it wasn't, at first when they were like, you should try and make some videos, I was like, oh God, I have to trying to market yourself. That's not something writers are naturally gifted at or able to do well. And so then when I was like, well, I'll just have fun with it and make little things that I like, then it became like an art project and I got interested in it, and it's just been a blast, and people have been so nice. And so I think I'm also lucky because it was my third book, so I had less of an emotional attachment to having that moment where you get to stand up in front of family and friends and be like, I did it, it's real, it happened. And so I feel like I have a couple friends publishing debuts right now, and that just seems hard. I mean, it's as hard as everybody else missing their graduations and weddings and stuff, but yeah, for me, it really hasn't been bad.
So the book is dedicated to your mother, which I found interesting because this book, I feel like parents in it are not necessarily the literary heroes of it. Michael's mom and Bunny's mom. So what kind of impression does a parent make on their kid? And then as a parent yourself, I know this is a very profound question, but how do we not mess up our kids?
Well, I mean, I think that so my mom was actually a really amazing mom and is very much believed in me as a writer, and is the one that continually urged me to invest in myself and keep going, even when it seemed like it was all going to come to nothing, kind of. And so the bad parenting in the book is not really a function of her parenting or a reflection of it. But she had some real bad parents. And so that problem of what do you do with really bad parents has been very much part of the mythology of my family and the things that I wondered about growing up. In so many ways, my mom, she seemed so impossibly glamorous to me when I was growing up. She was the first fictional character I ever fell in love with, was imagining my mom before I was born. So in that way, I think that that's part of why. But also there's just a simple plot expediency where if they had good parents, they would stop all this. Yeah. Good parents would not let the plot happen, and then how do you not mess up your own kids? I mean, I think that they're always going to think that you did. But you have to just sort of think that loving them and doing your honest best is going to be good enough. Because how else can you move forward? I try and just let them be whoever they are, and I try not to tell them who they are so that they can decide, kind of.
How many kids do you have?
I have 2 boys.
And the ages?
Almost 5 and almost 8.
Oh, okay. Yeah. How are they doing?
It's funny. I've been thinking about that a lot. What are they going to remember of this time, and how is it going to change them? And at first, it was clear the change and the uncertainty and all the grown-ups talking all worried was making them really anxious, and they would, lose their temper and get bored with each other. And now they can play together for hours. And I just think because they're a little bit far apart in age for them to be natural playmates. Mm-hmm. But I feel like because of this, they will now be much closer than they would have otherwise.
Yeah, there are so many things like that. The positives that are kind of coming out in this too. And, you can really choose to concentrate on the bad things, but choosing to concentrate on the really good things and positive things has been healing for me, at least.
Oh, yeah. Well, and it's also, there's this sort of disparity between my daytime lived reality and then my awareness of what's happening in the country. Yeah. And so it feels sometimes like selfish, the moments of joy that we have just like around the house. But at the same time, like, what am I going to try and be unhappy here? Like,
Yeah.
I'm trying to keep it as happy and nice for my kids as I can.
Yeah. Well,
And
and it's
not,
all relative too. I mean, um, I think it is great to think of the whole country, but that in and of itself is a lot to put on someone's shoulders. So I think it's, there's a
true.
happy medium of that.
Yeah.
So I wanted to talk, one of my favorite quotes in the book is on page 37, and it's about realness. And you bring up RuPaul's Drag Race. And do you watch?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Are you watching this season?
I'm not watching this season. I've fallen out. My whole television schedule has been messed up.
Understandably. So page 37 says, it was about being able to put your finger on, so you're describing realness here. And it was about being able to put your finger on all the tiny details that added up to an accurate impression. But it was also finding within yourself the essence of that thing. It was about finding a deeper authenticity through artifice. And in that sense, it was paradoxical and therefore intoxicating to me. To tell the truth by lying, that was at the heart of realness. So I wanted to kind of discuss realness with you and what you kind of meant by that paragraph, because the writing in that is just beautiful.
Well, I mean, I think that for me, the parallels between drag and writing fiction and acting, all those like the attempt to locate human meaning through these layers of artifice, they all seem very connected to me. And so I think that that's as much of a little artistic statement of my own as it is like a commentary about drag or about, I mean, I think that, because I think there's like a large audience of teen girls that grow up loving drag and especially loving that show and RuPaul. And I think that some of it's because when you're first, I mean, I remember first sort of realizing that other people were wearing makeup and I should figure out how to put it on. And it's not like girls are born knowing how to do all that. So you're trying to learn how to present femininity and how to display it socially, and it's not obvious, and I personally was very bad at it. And so watching it be taken apart and then put back together in these interesting ways, and in these sometimes exaggerated, like powerful ways, was really like comforting and fascinating. And so I think that that's part of why I personally loved drag when I was a teenager. And I think that it's true for both Bunny and Michael.
Yeah. Well, and just the fact that, you go back to high school, which the two main characters are in, you're trying to figure yourself out so much. It's not even about drag. It's just literally about faking it and fitting in and determining what society or your high school figures out what realness is. When you look back on your high school, did you have a good experience? Because it's a tough time, I think, in anyone's life.
I really struggled with high school, and I think I would have anywhere that I was. Like, I don't think it was the situation that I was in that was particularly difficult. I think that, like, I was uncertain about who I was and how to fit in and all those things. And so I very much was trying on every way am I this person? Should I dye my hair blue? Should I went to boarding school for high school. And so I left for boarding school when I was 13. And then I left without graduating to go to college. So I moved to New York City when I was 16 and moved in with my best friend. And so then was sort of having in many ways, my 20s and my teen years got elided and kind of overlaid. And so I made some just really spectacularly stupid decisions that led to adventures that are either depressing or funny, depending on what mood you're in, really. And
maybe
so
that's why you became such an amazing writer, though, because of
well, maybe, you never know. I wouldn't take it out of the soup now. But maybe that is why I write about those high school years. I mean, they're definitely having a really different experience than I did. And maybe it's some sort of wish fulfillment or fantasy, of if you had those years. I mean, although this would be a really odd wish fulfillment. But I do tend to write about high schoolers a lot, so there must be something there.
Well, I think it's something, that everyone goes through. The reason why I think the book meant so much to me is because I went to a Lutheran parochial school. So, and brace yourself, I am a gay man, but I'm not sure if you could tell, but I went to a Lutheran school where coming out was not a possibility. And the bullying, I mean, I had a great experience, but also a lot of bullying going on. And so in the book, it kind of gets into that, and Michael deals with it. And so that's why the book meant so much to me, because I was a fraction of who I really, not that my sexuality is all of who I am, but it is a big part of my identity. And I had no choice to be able to show that in high school.
Yeah. I think, I think part of the reason that my teens and early 20s were as tumultuous as they were is because I wasn't really comfortable with my sexuality either. And so, a lot of it was like just praying so hard that I wouldn't accidentally kiss my friend when I was drunk, or, and also trying to figure out, I felt, because I was always overweight when I was growing up, and I didn't feel like beautiful or desirable, but I also didn't have a personality that like lent itself well to being the object of a high school boy's affection. I felt like I was constantly trying to game the system or rig it so that I could pass as like a regular girl, kind of.
Yeah.
And I just had a lot of like weird self-hatred, and for me it wasn't even that I was living in a repressive society. I had plenty of friends that were out and gay and bi, and so I think my problems with it were much more like self-hatred, like internalized misogyny oriented.
Yeah. So is that where the character of Bunny kind of came from, but just in the, like with your trying to, because Bunny also is, so she's the 6'5",
6'3", I think by the end.
6'3", and she's not necessarily happy because she feels like her body image isn't what a high school boy would want.
Absolutely. Well, and I think that in some way it was easier to talk about it when someone is tall or athletic or physically powerful and therefore failing to be a sex object. It's clearer that it's not a larger failure on that person's part. Whereas I think once you start talking about fatness, it's like a whole other, it's a much more complicated cultural issue. And it's a lot harder to say, to just talk about failing to be a sex object and not talk about how like despicable we feel fatness is, if that makes sense. Yeah. And so I could get at things a little bit more simply and easily by having her be tall. But also I think it was a fantasy for me. I was really, really tall as a kid. I haven't grown since I was 10 years old. And so I thought that I was going to be like a giantess. Like I was positive. And because I grew up not knowing my dad, even though I knew he was short, there was still some part of me that's like, who knows? Like, I could have some magic tall gene I don't know about. And then when I wasn't, it was such a disappointment. And I kind of like still was always really strong and like carried a lot of muscle. And so like identified as like big and powerful. And then had to really have some rude awakenings about how not big and powerful I actually was physically.
So both of your last two novels, Girls from Corona Del Mar and Knockout Queen, are really, I think, in essence about friendship, and they're about two people and friends. Did you find a difference in writing about two straight girls and then a gay man and a girl in high school? Did you find a difference in writing those two friendships?
I mean, yes and no. I think that a lot of times those friendships in high school before you have your first serious romantic relationship are your most intimate relationship in your life. It's at a time when you're kind of starting to be more distant from your parents and from your family. And so your friends take on that almost role that a lover has. And so I think in both instances, they really are being that for each other. And so it's a little bit more intense than what an adult friendship might be. Yeah. And those boundaries are sort of blurry. but I think that it's funny because I think that I let myself explore some stuff with Bunny and Michael that I kind of wanted to avoid in the Girls from Corona Del Mar, and that's the extent to which you are willing to drop each other for a sexual relationship.
Yeah.
And so both Bunny and Michael have these moments where they choose their lovers over each other. And I think that's such a stereotype about female relationships that I didn't want to really talk about it in the Girls from Corona Del Mar. And whereas once it was a boy and a girl, I was like, yeah, well, and that definitely happens. You know, I don't know.
So the book is more from Michael's point of view, but how would it have been different, do you think, if it was more from Bunny's? Because I think the only time we really get into Bunny's head is almost Michael's opinion of Bunny or what she's thinking. But I would love to know, you know how, I don't know if you've ever read one of the books that, like, first book is about from one person's point of view, and then the next there's a sequel and it's from the same things happen but from the other point of view. And I wonder what kind of book the Knockout Queen would be if it was more from Bunny's.
Well, I was trying to write it from Bunny's point of view for about a year before I understood that it wasn't going to work. Okay. And part of it was like, you know, Jay Gatsby can't tell the Great Gatsby. Like the larger than life character is not able to narrate their own story kind of in a relatable way. And so I knew I needed a focalizer, but I think in a lot of ways, Michael turns kind of into her lawyer. A lot of the book is about the judgment of Bunny and how do we judge her and what do we make of her? Is she good or is she bad? And Michael himself thinks different things at different points in the book. And when the world seems to be judging her too harshly, he's like, well, I don't think that's fair. I mean, look, she's so good and look at these things and she has this good heart. And then when it seems like the world isn't going to punish her, he's like, well, I don't know. I really kind of think that you ought to be punished. And so he is teaching us in a lot of ways how to love her. I think that my problem when I was writing it from her point, she was experiencing the events as pain. She wasn't able to have any kind of like nuanced insight into why people were doing the things they were doing to her or what it meant or what was good and valuable about herself. She was just having high school kids be mean to her. You know what I mean? And feeling hurt and abandoned by her dad. And it didn't have the layers to get at some of those larger issues about violence.
I think you can totally tell that I mean, I didn't know that you had written it from Bunny's point of view, but I think how amazing it made the book now to have done that for a year, because I don't think we would have gotten the same things out of it or Michael's opinion if you hadn't had all that backstory on Bunny writing.
I have to think about things from all the characters' points of view before, because it's really easy to sort of like lose touch with what the other character in a scene is thinking. And so sometimes I have to write it from both points of view before I can write it from one point of view well. Yeah. And I do love making one character suddenly kind of psychic about the other character. It's a great cheat in first person. You're like, like, I think what's going on with her is blah, 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 blah.
Yeah. Well, and we all do that. I mean, we all kind of almost, like if you're in a conversation with your friend or even like a fight, you're kind of thinking almost about what you think they're thinking when, you know, that might not even be the case at all.
Absolutely. We're all projecting and trying to anticipate what other people's internal spaces are like all the time. And that fascinates me. And the ways we get it right and we can effortlessly do it, and the ways we get it so wrong, even about people that we love and who we're close to.
Yeah. So masculinity and femininity is also a thing that I find so interesting, that concept of why society feels the need to put such strict labels on those. And I think the book really dives into that. So I was wondering if you could give me your definition of masculinity and then your definition of femininity.
I don't know. I'm so like, wait, am I allowed to swear? I'm so effed up about that I really feel like so much of so growing up without a dad, and I didn't have any brothers, and there were really my mom didn't date, like there were really no men in my life. And so I grew up, it was me, my mom, and my grandmother. And so it was just different ages of kind of like very similar creatures. And I found men really like mysterious and alienating, and just trying to understand, like, synthesize like Chuck Norris and like the characters from 90210. Like I was really unclear about men. And then the second part of my life has been having, marrying a man and then having two boys, and sort of being surrounded by maleness. And so I think that my more informed adult opinion about what masculinity is, or the part of masculinity that I love best, is I once asked my husband what his definition of happiness was, and he said a peaceful kingdom. And this idea of sort of like wanting to create a space where everything is fair and where everything is peaceful, the idea of like leading people, of striving to make the world right. This I feel like is I think it's a human impulse, but it's the best part of the sort of stereotype of masculinity.
Yeah.
And in terms of femininity, I don't know. For so long, what scared me the most about femininity was the selflessness that seemed to be required. And I was really worried that marriage and children would erase me. And I don't know, it was interesting. During this time, I went back and actually looked at my diaries from when I was a teenager and in my 20s. And over and over again, I'm actively worried about this and how I don't want to get married and have kids. It's like, no one was asking you to marry him, sweetie. Like, why are you thinking about this? But I was really worried about being a woman and what was going to be required of me. And so I had this idea that women were sort of supposed to give up having all of their own needs. And maybe that's part of why there was almost like the cultural idea of women and like the power and focus and seduction that you could see like in drag being sort of portrayed, these like virtues and values that women have. And then there was my lived experience, which is that you just try and keep your drunk husband from murdering you. And that's like the best that you can really hope for.
Yeah.
So I don't know what I think real femininity is. And I don't know why our society is so hung up on such narrow definitions. I think it's like getting more complicated, but not all societies have such narrow definitions.
Yeah.
I
think another reason why I just loved this book is because, people think of gay men as effeminate, and then Bunny was tall and powerful. And so you almost switch the definitions for each character, which has really made me examine why society puts why would Bunny be looked at as more masculine just because she was tall and maybe muscular and athletic? And why would someone look at Michael and just because he was gay look at as feminine?
Yeah, it's true. And I think there are I guess I'm very interested in the difference between sex, like biological sex and gender identity, and these issues of like physical power. Because one of the narratives of my life was kind of getting into like a kind of like quasi-abusive relationship where there was a lot of like physical fighting and grappling, and realizing that like I was gonna lose every time. And that part of why women had been chattel throughout history was because when it comes to a fist fight, we lose. Like our ability to enforce our will is always circumscribed by our power to make our will happen. And that made me angry for a long time. And especially in the current political climate, I think I used to have this very like naive, optimistic kind of like Obama years outlook, and this belief in steady progress, and things were going to get better and better, and people were going to let go of their prejudices. And then sometimes now I'm like, I don't know, it could all just get rolled back in an instant. Like all it takes is some mega disasters and people will go back to the repressive, horrible ways that they subjugate each other, just like that.
Yeah.
And so thinking about it is terrifying. It terrifies me. And I think the association of masculinity and physical power is, I have very complicated mixed feelings about it, I guess.
Yeah. When you sat down to write the novel, did it turn out the way you thought? I think I saw on a Ask an Instagram thing that you said that you were writing a book for a whole year that was completely different. So when you sat down to write this book, did it turn out how you thought it would be?
I had almost no expectations. So what I had been doing for, I think, the 2 years before was writing this big book that I was trying to make like my big serious book where I wanted to talk about like intergenerational, like family problems. And it was actually about a woman who faked her own death to get away from her kids. But it just didn't work. And there's still things that I like about it.
I would still love to read it.
Oh, well, that's very sweet. I think you would immediately be like, I understand why you set this aside. But because I was trying to do this like character in the round thing where every chapter was told by a different person. And so you get kind of different aspects of the story from different points of view and are unclear about facts and stuff. And it was a technical nightmare on some level. And so I just got frustrated and I didn't know how to fix it. And my editor and agent both had kind of separate ideas about how it could be fixed. And I just didn't know what I thought. And so I knew I had to shelve it and just let it be for a while. And I was mad. I was mad that I hadn't gotten it right. And I was mad that it wasn't as good as I hoped it would be. And so I kind of had this rebellious energy going on where I was like, well, if I can't write something good, then I'm just going to write whatever I want, which had I not been writing what I wanted before, I mean, it doesn't like, I don't know what I thought, but so I just really from the beginning was having fun with the Knockout Queen. And I wasn't really thinking about what it would look like when I was done. I was just following every impulse that interested me and cracked me up. And so many of the characters in this book are my favorite characters I've ever written. Like Ray Lampert is one of my favorite characters I've ever written. Obviously, I mean, Bunny, I had written a novel 10 years ago called Bunny Lampert, and that I never published or even really, I mean, I guess I tried to publish it at one point, but it was more of a collection of short stories in which she was a peripheral character. So I was kind of doing like a negative portrait thing. So she's been in my mind for forever, trying to talk about her and who she might be. And obviously I love Michael and his voice, but I love even like Miss Harriet. I love Anne Marie, like, and I just had so much fun writing it that it doesn't feel like something I made, if that makes sense. Like, and I wasn't an architect of it, like, oh, and then it will be like this. I was just following it in some way. So it was
the
very
aura
different.
of your big book and big themes must have still been with you, because I feel like, I think I said that in my, I was talking about the book or recommending it to someone. I was like, I don't even think she realizes how profound and big some of the themes in it are. Cause I think you were just, because you can read it just as like it's a quick read and it's the great characters but it's also a lot deeper. And that's, what I really got out of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that some of the questions in the book, like how do we deal with whether we're good or whether we're bad? How do we deal with the fact that people we love are sometimes bad? Those are the questions that probably I will never stop writing about. Like, I think there's a very comforting book by Betsy Lerner about writers, and she's like, guess what? Like, you're only going to write the same book over and over again. Like, you have a small amount of material and your job is to mine that material as richly and deeply as possible. And so I think in a lot of ways there's such similar themes in all three of my books, but I feel like I got into the meat of them more in this one.
So to piggyback off of that last comment, do you feel like is there anyone that's truly good and truly bad, and are we all capable of both?
I think that, I mean, so for one thing, I always want to write about things that I don't have the answer to, because otherwise you become like this didactic god setting up this simulated situation to prove your own point, kind of. And so I have very mixed feelings about it. I do think that we're all capable of being good and all capable of being bad, and that a huge amount of why people do bad things is a situation that they wind up in that they're responding to. Or sometimes people make a mistake, they make an error, you know, and we all are very capable of that. But there still comes this point, and it's like a point that haunts me in my own life. But when I love someone who is bad, at what point do you decide to stop loving them? And can you decide to stop loving someone? And how do you, because I've had a lot of like relationships with people with like substance abuse problems and stuff, and there comes this point where you have to stop enabling the behavior, and you have to set boundaries and limits on how much you can let someone into your life if they're being super destructive. And so those questions of how you make those moral judgments, to me, it's all related to these sort of larger questions about punishment and what we hope punishment is even going to do. I think we have really mixed feelings about, I think our position culturally about punishment is really unexamined, and we believe a lot of conflicting things simultaneously. And so to me, like, that it's part of why there's so much like shunning and social ostracization, and then prison in the book. They're all different ways that we try and influence people who are behaving in a way that we don't like.
Sorry, I was just like thinking about all that, what you just said. So the book is being described as a dark comedy with flawed characters. But I guess I was wondering what some positive characteristics of Michael and Bunny.
Well, Bunny is loyal and loving and honest to a fault, and open-hearted and kind and tolerant. I mean, one of the ways Michael describes her is if she was a dog, it would be called a good temperament. She takes a lot of abuse before she gets riled. And she is, like, I think fundamentally a sweet being. Michael is, as much as he's afraid of himself, I don't think there's anything for him to fear. He's so smart and insightful, and I think he feels really anxious about the ways he betrayed his mother, kind of, and they had kind of a codependent relationship when he was growing up, and then they have this big rift when she goes to prison. And so I think he feels like he's a bad person who's capable of just sort of walking away from someone that he was so entangled and enmeshed with. And he's always afraid that he's going to do it again, or that he is like asocial in some hopeless way. And I think he feels scared. He really doesn't examine the way that he doesn't try at all to integrate his sexuality with the rest of his life. And he doesn't even really want to talk about it with Bunny. So some of it is a self-protective high school years, like, I can't be this way openly. I don't even know who I am yet. Mm-hmm. And part of it is that he's afraid of what he's doing, and so he can't look at it because he needs to be allowed to keep doing it. And so, which I super identify with. Yeah. But I think that even as Michael is worried that he is too judgmental, I mean, he's so open-hearted, and he tries so hard to be a good friend to Bunny, and he tries so hard to be a good son, and he is really a good person, even when he worries that he's not.
Well, what I found interesting too is all the men he meets up with. He is more, I think, accepting and sure of himself and secure in himself than most of those men.
I think so. I think that is very true.
But maybe he just doesn't know that, or he's too young to figure that out yet. So are you working on anything right now, and are you finding it hard to be creative?
Well, okay. So I am doing reading for the next thing that I want to write. And it's an idea that I've had for a while, and I kept kind of shooing it away because I was like, that's too crazy. You can't do that. That's too crazy. And now I've just decided to go ahead and do it. And I mean, what's the worst that can happen? I write another bad book, and then I have to write another book after that. I mean, Like, the worst has come and gone, I feel. So I'm really excited about that. And it's all potential right now. So it feels very fun. I don't have to look at anything flawed or the possibility that it's all BS or, and doing the reading is really fun because it's involved reading about all sorts of weird stuff, like lots of weird physics texts and like stuff about war and how war is fought. And I'm reading like an amazing book about human sacrifice called The Highest Altar. And I don't know, human sacrifice, that's a whole other weird thing. Why did we start doing that? It's so universal, like literally every culture had a period of human sacrifice. And it's like some weird primate thing where when we are living in groups together, we're like, hey, what if we all just killed this one?
Yeah.
Why do we do that? It's so interesting to me.
Well, I can't wait to read it. Whatever it is.
Whatever it turns out to be.
Okay, so my favorite thing to do with authors is a speed round. So where I ask you some of your favorite things. And then I also, just for you, because I feel like there is this fun sassiness that the book comes out, I have a whole that we figure out what your names are.
Oh, yes. I am excited for that.
Okay, so are you ready for the speed round?
I'm ready. I'm anxious, but I'm ready.
Okay. Favorite book as a kid?
Oh, that's got to be A Wrinkle in Time.
Favorite novel?
Oh, there's so many that tie, but I would say maybe American Pastoral.
Ooh, I love that. That's a hard question. I get it. Favorite movie?
Wait, favorite what?
Movie.
Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure.
Favorite
or Dangerous Liaisons. That might be they're very different movies.
Yeah.
But they're both my favorite.
Favorite TV show?
Oh, 30 Rock is my comfort place.
Favorite song?
I've been thinking about this and I have no idea. I don't know that I have like an absolute favorite song.
Yeah. I don't think I really do either. I mean, I have many songs I like, but I don't know if I could have one that's like, that's my favorite.
Yeah. I mean, I probably like my comfort, like music that I would go back to is probably David Bowie, like any David Bowie song really.
Yeah. Favorite literary quote?
Well, okay. I don't think it's actually being said about literature or writing, but I always think of it in that context, which is it's from the Hotel New Hampshire, and it's being used about weightlifting and like physical fitness, but it's get obsessed and stay obsessed. And I think that is exactly what writing a novel is getting obsessed about something and then staying obsessed about it.
I love that. Favorite snack?
I have a real addiction to dried mango, to the extent that I have to only buy it in limited quantities or I will give myself horrible diarrhea by just like eating so much.
I have that same obsession. Dried fruit.
You do?
Mango number 1, dried apples number 2, but I love dried fruit. Book you've read multiple times?
Oh, Moby Dick definitely falls in that category. I find that book really funny and comforting. And then when you're reading it multiple times, you can just skip the boring chapters.
Okay, so Moby Dick like takes place on Nantucket, right?
Yes, I do. That's part of why I have to sojourn at some point to your bookstore.
Yes.
And with the spirit of Nantucket.
So So I interviewed Nat Philbrick, who wrote In the Heart of the Sea, which is kind of like the true story on Moby Dick. And he wrote a book called Why Read Moby Dick? And we had a whole conversation about how he's like, because he is, a firm fan of Moby Dick. And he said too, you should definitely read it, especially now, because it pertains so much to what we're going through with catastrophe and all of those things. But I can't do it. I'm trying.
Oh, well, how far have you gotten? Have you met Queequeg yet?
Yes. I have. Well, I think it's just like you said, and he said, maybe read like 2 chapters a day, or don't sit down and say, okay, I'm going to read Moby Dick like I'd read, the Knockout Queen. It's more
Yeah.
a slower process.
It is a slower process, but I think I can still remember the first time that I read Moby Dick, getting like the shakes because I was so excited at what it was when I started to understand what it was. Because I came to it thinking it was going to be like kind of a boring classic that I was going to force my way through in order to say that I'd read it.
Yeah.
And I was reading it in a pizzeria in Queens. And I remember because I was trying not to get the grease on the pages. And I was just like cracking up because I wasn't expecting it to be funny.
Yeah.
And then when it was, I was like, this is a deeply weird and eccentric book by a really insane but also interesting man. And like there are times when, I mean, even though like I love the chapter on the color white and everything, I don't necessarily read that one all the way through every time when I go back and look at that book. I definitely have sections that I dip in and out of. And so parts of that book are better than other parts, is what I'm saying.
Okay.
And so you should feel free to skim if a part gets boring, because it does get interesting again.
Okay. Well, yes, you need to come and visit, because we have a whole Moby Dick section of any type of book you want on it. And it's perfect. What are you reading right now?
Well, right now I'm reading Ruman Alam's new book. I just got it in the mail, and so it's a galley. I'm super excited.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's the title?
I know, that's terrible. Let me go get it's a phrase. Should I go get it or no? Is it not worth it?
I can look it up.
You can look it up. I know, but it's something about the night, and it has it's a phrase. It's one of those phrase titles. There's a lot of them now, and they run together in my mind. But the cover is gorgeous.
Okay, so now this is the thing that's just for Tim and Rufi, and I was so excited because it inspired me with the drag queen, and I was like, I really want to know Rufi's fun names. So it will not offend you if I ask you your stripper name, will it?
No.
Okay. I didn't think so. Okay. So do you have a drag queen name? First of all, I didn't know if maybe you just had one that you were like, you know what, this would be mine.
I don't have like a predetermined one. I think that if I were going to do drag, I would want to like dress as a man as opposed to trying to like dress as a more exaggerated woman. And so I feel like I would have to go in some sort of like boy angel territory because I have the really curly face.
Mm-hmm.
And but I'm not sure how, or like a little like buff sexy pirate I'm thinking, but I don't know what the name would be.
Okay, well, you get back to me on that if you ever figure it out. Okay, your stripper name, which is your first pet and then the street you grew up on.
So that would be Sweet Thing Iris. It's pretty
good. Okay, your quarantine nickname is how you feel right now and the last thing you ate.
Excitement bagel.
Look at that. Okay, your dragon name, which is a long one. So it's your name backwards, which that I'm gonna have to write that out.
Like Eifer, or the whole like
Eifer. No, Eifer. Your name backwards, the current mood, so that was excitement. So you're Eifer the excitement, excited, hoarder of your favorite food.
Dried mangoes.
And the thing to your left.
Electric piano.
So you're Eifer the excited, hoarder of dried mangoes and electric pianos.
I love it.
Okay, your band name is the color of your pants and what you had for dinner last night.
Black enchiladas.
Nice. That's going to be some dark music right there. Just like rock. Your memoir of 2020 is 2020 and the last text you sent.
Oh my gosh, we'll have to... I think it would be 2020. Did you get dog food? I have to look at the exact phrasing, but we're doing a communal PetSmart order right now. So I think that's what it would be.
Well, that was your memoir. Oh, well, thank you for doing that. That's just, I feel like, to make people laugh. It was my new thing that I'm adding to these Tim Talks. So
I love it.
I find those names so funny.
They are funny and they're silly. And that's what's sort of magical about this time is, I don't know, I've done so many like even radio interviews where normally it would be in a studio and everyone would be sort of their professional selves, but instead they're in their house and suddenly the neighbor starts weed whacking and it's these more like candid, intimate moments. I think it's really cool.
Yeah, I agree. It makes it a little bit more real and connects us more because that's what we kind of need right now. So thank you so much for spending the time. I know it's been a crazy week and I really appreciate you making time for me. I thank you so much.
Oh, this has been pure fun. Thank you so much for doing it and for putting together such amazing questions. It's really a pure delight. Thank you.
And when we can start traveling again, I feel like you need to put Nantucket on your bucket list.
I really do. It will be, I'm already planning the trip in my mind.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Bye.